So if at any point millennials and Gen Z in the room feel like I'm saying something wrong, feel free to boo. If you think I'm saying the right thing, feel free to say preach. Absolutely, just go crazy. But really, I just want to talk through some of the assumptions, and that's how I'll be structuring the speech, is talking through some of these assumptions and how some of them are just assumptions and some things are just framed wrong. You don't need to spend a lot of money on your employees, and that's a big thing. And engaging them. A lot of the stuff, yeah, you can spend money and it's good, it'll do good in the workplace, but you don't always have to do that. And one of the biggest things I've taken out of a lot of the presentations and panels today is the biggest thing you can do is communicate. Communication is incredibly important. Being open and transparent, it's incredibly important, and it's also cheap. But for those playing at home, I know Will before was saying how there's a lot of shift in the way that we label generations. I'm going to go with this one. We jump around a bit, but essentially millennials make up 45% of the workforce currently globally, with Gen Z sort of bringing up the rear. Millennials are out the front and they're leading by example. Gen Z, and to a degree Gen Alpha shortly, are essentially improving and innovating. Things that are good for millennials and the way we see business, it's probably going to change significantly as Gen Z rises through the ranks. However, it's really important to keep in mind that we live in a world that's, I guess, so adaptable and so different from the world that even we grew up in, that really you need to be able to adapt your business and change around fairly quickly. To do so, I'm going to talk through these three assumptions. First of all, we've got that millennials are just plain lazy. That's like the number one thing about millennials. Number two, it's that we're entitled. And number three, it's that we just job hop and we move around. And the reason, I just want to go back to this slide, sorry, is about the reason that I'm talking about millennials and Gen Z today is that we are moving into positions of power. We are a giant part of the workforce. And essentially, we are the change makers of tomorrow, and we're moving into developing those management strategies. So those dumb assumptions that we're lazy, that we are job hoppers, and that we're just constantly expecting more and more. And that's just not true. We're not entitled. But let's start off with that first one, that we're lazy. So, let's start off with that first one. There we go. That we're lazy. That one rings out all the time. It is in most of the articles that you'll see. Every second article is about how millennials and Gen Z are lazy. But, in fact, we work differently. So much has changed about the way we work and where we work that it can be seen that we're a bit lazy because we want remote opportunities, we work with technology that enables us to work faster, we're not talking as much sometimes because we're actually speaking or talking on a platform like computers. But in fact, that's not the case at all. And one of the things I guess I wanted to talk about this working differently, I've got a good example. I had a fortuitous breakfast this morning at a delightfully wanky cafe. I was eating granola that was quinoa, pine nuts, and something else. It wasn't granola, but they called it that. But at the same time, I'm on Slack, messaging a client, talking back and forth. I'm editing Shopify code on my laptop. I've got my tablet out as well. And I'm sitting there, enjoying filter coffee, looking out on the street. And it's not the workplace that a lot of people are used to. Things change. But at the same time, I might have been out enjoying a nice breakfast, but I'm also doing work. And that's the thing, is that being away from the office and using multiple devices, that's what's changed, is that we are, I guess, constantly on the go and we're constantly available. And we have these technologies in place to allow us to do business everywhere. And so I think there needs to be a bit of trust, and I think Will talked about this. There needs to be a lot more trust involved in businesses, in their younger employees and how they work. And to do so, I think you're able to implement a few things into businesses and organizations from the ground up. So I just want to talk through a few of those. So first of all, the biggest thing we do at work, how can you work differently? In business, we have staff forums on processes. No matter what size of business, you should have the ability in place for your staff to talk about the processes that are in place. Yes, they can have their comments, Yes, everyone should have input. It doesn't mean you have to take them all on board. But really, if you're owning a business or managing a business that has frontline staff and they're running processes that you've put in place, really you want those people to understand those processes and you want them to be a part of building that out. Because we were talking about ownership just before, they need to own that and they need to understand it. If there are discrepancies between what they believe and what you believe as a manager or as an owner, you need to talk about them, openly communicate and rationalize why things are the way they are and why you believe that process is better. With that process of collaboration, you should find processes that work just as well. Another thing, and I talked about this with the technology I was using today at breakfast, you need to integrate familiar technology or look to see if you can. So a lot of businesses there are still businesses out there that run with pen and paper tools, with folders, with Rolodexes, and it's a bit outdated, and sometimes that means that their younger staff are having to deal with that, and they're just not quite, I guess, used to it. They don't know what they should be doing. They don't know how to integrate in their lives, and they might see an easier way to do stuff. It's very important to talk to your younger staff and ask them, do they know if there are any technologies that could help out? Is there any way that they could do their job better if they had the ability to access these technologies? I guess that's how some businesses find out about Tanda. We're all here for the Workforce Success Conference, and that's how some businesses find out about Tanda, because their employees have come from other businesses that have used it, and they say, hey, you know what would be a much better system to make sure I'm paid on time and I'm looked after at work? Well, I've got this technology that I was using at another workplace. Have those conversations. Be open, honest, talk about them. And the next thing is reviewing common requests and test them. Provide the framework to test out new ideas and integrate them into the business. So the two that constantly come to mind for me are, one, music in the workplace. So I've worked in a lot of places, from Yatla pies in the bakery all the way through to a nice office on Eagle Street in finance. The biggest difference was that, obviously, finance is a bit more stuffy, but also we were allowed to have music in the bakery, and then suddenly I was in an office in an autonomous marketing role, and I wasn't allowed to be sitting there listening to music. I said, look, if you need me, you can tap me on the shoulder, you can, attend to me at any point. I'm not plugging myself away from the world, I'm still available. Give me this, allow me to do this, and you'll find I'm a bit more productive. And luckily, they enabled me to do that, and we tested it out, and it worked out a lot better. Sometimes, yes, they were perhaps yelling from their office, my manager, to get me, but then again, you shouldn't really be yelling from your office. Maybe come out and say hello. But, we tested it out. And it's a common occurrence in business that, that people say, hey, look, I need this to improve my role. It's a simple thing, music. Another thing for open plan offices, for example, we have, at the moment, a Sonos controller. Everyone has access to the playlist, and we curate playlists, or we say, hey, you're in charge of the music today. Yeah, sure, sometimes people's tastes change, and sometimes people's tastes aren't that great. But you take the good with the bad, and then suddenly you're all engaged, you're all working together, and you all have the opportunity. And lastly, another thing that probably comes up in a lot of these workplaces, particularly in offices, not in frontline, but the ability to work remotely. That's the dream, right? And look, I said I was out this morning working remotely. A lot of the time I still have to be at the office. And that's an idea that probably Gen Z and Gen Alpha aren't going to face. They're going to say, you go to the same place every day and you're always there, or you're expected to be there 90% of the time. However, if you implement, I guess, a regular remote day, maybe once a fortnight, once a month, try it out. See if that person or that staff member can be away just for a day. It invigorates them because they're away from their office, they're outside of their regular environment, they're not insular, and it drives them to be able to finally go, you know what, I actually do want to face-to-face with my colleagues, I want to be with them. So these are just little things, like ideas on how you can, I guess, test and measure and change things up. Because if you do this, you're going to gain trust, you're going to be able to be shown to be transparent and communicate, and you're also going to maybe find some new processes that work. The assumption number 2 is that we're job hoppers. Now this one, it's actually true. We are job hoppers. We do move. But that's not quite framed right. What it is we're seeking experience. Everything is about experience these days. The experience economy is the economy we live in. And that number, 2.5, that's that cursed number. Every 2.5 years is the stats that's been barked out for the past few years. Every 2.5 years, we look to change jobs. Now, there's a few reasons for that. One, it's always nice to change things up a bit. Two, as I said, millennials are coming into positions of power. So that means that they're moving through the workforce and they're, I guess, building a career. So they're not in a position where they'll probably stay for a while. They're not in a position where, they have got their experience and they're just now managing others. They're trying to collect experience because experience is everything. You need that experience because no one hires for the JD anymore. Yes, you've got on paper that you want someone who's really good with numbers, but you also want someone who's really good with numbers who also fits into the culture of a business or understands the industry that you're in, because the numbers change depending on what organization you're in. So really, the reason we move around a lot is because we're gaining this experience to further our careers and to add value to other organizations. So how can you beat that 2.5 curse? Well, first of all, lay out career plans very early on. So the best thing to do is ensure that when someone comes, ideally at day one, they know where that role is going to take them. They know that here are the clear steps to progression and have regular reviews. See where they're at. See if they're ready to take that next career step. If they're a frontline staff, sometimes it might just be moving into a different role. It's not always straight from frontline to management, but ensure that they know where their path leads, where they can go. Secondly, always openly discuss the bigger picture. Your staff need to live the brand, live the business. They need to know why you do what you do. Because recently, they've found that millennials see that businesses just have profiteering at top of mind. It's a necessity. You need profits to drive a business in general and to keep going. But the millennials need to know that you are doing something for a certain reason. Because if I'm going to work for a company or if you are going to work for an organization for a long time, you want to know how you're contributing to that bigger picture. So you should be providing them the opportunity to learn about that and know how they're contributing. I was talking to Jess before and she was talking about hope. When you lose hope, that's when you generally shift. And if there's no hope, you're not going to stay. Providing those career plans and letting them know how it relates to the bigger picture, that is openly discussing the bigger picture and giving them hope. Giving them the hope to stay, that things will get better and that they can contribute to that. And then the final one is creating outsized roles. So Will just before talked about in management they want to put someone into deep water where they have to test their mettle and test that they're trustworthy, a manager. It's the same with any staff member. Provide the opportunity for them to go further than their job role, for them to go further than what it says on paper. I like to call it, and I'll come back to it, giving them the freedom to fail. The freedom to fail within a framework. So we do this a lot at work, and it's a management style that I really enjoy. So my MD will come up to me, I'll have an issue, I'll say, hey look, this has happened. He'll say, what do you think you should do about that? And very early on, when I started at the agency, I was like, oh, well, I don't know, like, what have you found in your experience? And he said, well, I found this, but what do you think? I said, well, I'll do this, this, this. He goes, give it a try it. Because, he goes, that sounds reasonable. I wouldn't do it that way, but give it a try. Giving the ability for someone to go beyond and do something different is really, really enhancing, and it builds trust in the business, and it also gives them the opportunity to learn more, build their experience, which they probably will take away later on, particularly if they're early in their career. But there's nothing wrong with moving on. Sure, we'd like them to stay for more than 2.5 years, but if someone leaves, you want that to reflect well on your business. You want them to say, that business gave me everything I know. That business gave me a fundamental knowledge of this, of X, Y, Z. Because when they go out there into the world and you are sending out great employees into the world, your business looks a lot better. You're going to get better people coming to you because they want a job, they want to come with the same result. And so it's almost an avenue of marketing for your business. As I said, no one truly hires for the JD. We collect experience like it's nobody's business. Like a sneakerhead waiting in a supply drop trying to bundle them up so they can resell them. We collect experience. And that's in everything you do at the business should allow them to gain new experiences. Now, the final misconception is that we're entitled. That we're entitled and, we deserve the world. That comes up a lot as well. But in fact, the truth is we're expectant. We have expectations of what we should have, what we should get, because information is everywhere. We know what everyone else is getting. We know, what we want, and we're very vocal about it. Well, most of us are very vocal about it. So you really need to find a way to engage your staff and their expectations. Number one, and this comes from the most recent millennial report actually that Deloitte put out, millennials and Gen Z are very interested in getting that soft skill training. Soft skill training and on-the-job training is key. Why? Because they're in the action. They're not seeing it as an extracurricular activity. They're doing it on the job. They're learning in a real environment. They're not having to come in on their weekend, or they're not being trained in some other office and then suddenly dropped into the front lines. And also, these soft skills are things that they can take out into the greater world and build out their resume. It also, I think some of these soft skills were brought up by Will before as well. It's very convenient. But trustworthiness, being able to communicate, being able to, associate with people, to be empathic, that stuff is very important. And it's actually what we seek in the workplace. I'll refer to again this fortuitous breakfast I had this morning. When I went to pay, oddly I had cash, which is really odd. Everyone goes straight to the machine. And the young girl there, she was Gen Z. I'm guessing, but I'm pretty sure she was. I handed cash. She got a bit flustered. Was like, oh, I've already put it into the machine. So I was like, well, this isn't going to pay pass. So she took the money. It was a $100 bill. I'm not flaunting that. It just so happened I had that. And you'll see why that counts in a second. She took it and then continued to be a bit flustered and said, look, I've got to go get management. I was like, okay, it's real, I swear. And she's gone and got the manager and come back. But what it turned out was she didn't know how to give the correct change. It was a $21 meal. I gave her $179 change, but she just didn't quite know how it all worked. She was also using this old register to get the cash out because everything else was tile. But the manager dealt with it really well. He didn't just say, hey, look, let me look after it. I'm just, stand back. And that's what happened to me as a kid. When I worked at Subway I know some of the guys were talking about, working for 50 cents an hour. I worked for $6.08 an hour at Subway when I was like 13. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. Would not get out of bed for that now. But I used to get yelled at and the manager would take over. However, this manager talked us through the process. He says, I got a good tip for figuring out how much change you should give, subtraction. He didn't say that. But he talked her through it. He was very kind. He worked with her. He made sure that she was the one giving me the change. He said, hey, look, if this happens again, I heard him. He said, if this happens again, that's cool. Don't be worried. Just come over, come talk to me. Because as long as you let the customer know what's happening, everything's going to be fine. And that soft skill training was so important. Just learning how to communicate without, suddenly seizing up and running off. That's so important. That girl, hopefully, will take that away. And suddenly, if that happens again, deal with the situation a bit better. But honestly, soft skill training from the mouths of babes, Gen Z and millennials, is so important to us, as well as that on-the-job training. Also, the final point there, self-paced learning. Formal, rigid training, it's not our jam. We're not about that. We've got technology at our hands, in our faces. We can learn on the go. And we also, particularly when it comes to job roles, we'll learn what we need to, and then if we want to gain extra experience, we can do that. But if you can incentivize that self-paced learning, so, for me, for instance, we have, I work with HubSpot. They've got an academy program there. We just had a mandate come down and said, hey, look, guys, in your own time, we need you to get the certifications. And, of course, the minute there was some sort of competition on offer, I was right in there. The next day, came back with 4 certifications on HubSpot. And everyone jumped on the bandwagon. because it doesn't feel like it's forced, it's not rigid, and we can see that we're doing it to develop ourselves. Ensure, obviously, you need to give time frames. I feel like, yes, I said we weren't lazy, but sometimes people go, we are procrastinators, so we'll push it back. But if you have an incentivization and you provide people the opportunity to learn at their own pace, they're more likely going to take it up, and it's going to provide value to their business. The three things, if I could sum it up, that we do expect as expectant people: great culture, and that's been bandied around, I think, in pretty much every presentation today on the workforce. We want culture. We want clear career progression, which I discussed before, and responsibility. Little responsibility goes a long way. And talking about the responsibility and talking about how someone manages that responsibility is even more important. We don't need a Google campus. A lot of people like to think, hey, we want sleep pods. I think they have some at UQ. Don't know why. But we don't need that. There's only so many times you can go down a slide to be happy at work. Eventually that slide, pretty boring. And to be honest, eventually, the more times you go down that slide, boss is probably going to be looking at you saying, hey, can you do some work, please? Unless you have your laptop while sliding down, it's probably not going to work out. There's always ways around it, but we don't need that. We don't need ridiculous things. What we want is communication. We want great culture. Slide provides a bit of culture when you're having a Nerf war, but great culture comes from people and communication, events, soft skills, all sorts of things outside of having to spend money on great infrastructure in an office. Now, don't get me wrong. Beautiful office does wonderful things. Beautiful workplace does wonderful things. But it's really that culture and the communication with people that's going to create a great organization. So I've got here a great Venn diagram that I've created. Feel free to tweet that one. That's pretty good, if I do say so myself. But essentially, it's blending employee desires and the ongoing objectives of the business. So on the left there, you've got what we expect. Culture, the ability to work remotely, discussion, early career planning. And also on the right-hand side, you've got what the business needs. They need to provide that clarity of business objectives in return for those perks. Hey, you get free haircuts. Hey, you get free coffee. Yeah, HubSpot gives out, we were at the conference yesterday, they give out unlimited holiday. You can take as much as you want. But it has to align, and when it does align, because people understand what they need to do to get those perks. If you're getting unlimited holiday, you better believe that you've got to work your ass off when you're at work, particularly if you've taken the last 3 weeks off. But in the middle there, you get that employee engagement, and as I said, there people actually hang around for a beer or work social events because they actually want to be at work. This blending of work and life is happening. Now, a lot of people talk about a work-life balance, but I think we see more and more, particularly with millennials and Gen Z, that we're bringing work and life together, that like it's in the fold. We want to be able to be at work and perhaps not always feel like we're just at work. We can be there, we're friendly with the people we work with. The workplace encourages us to be social, and we don't feel like we're removed from our lives. It should be inbuilt into your life. You should be enjoying where you are, and just, to be honest, millennials and Gen Z just want it to be one seamless process. Yeah, maybe one day they won't call it going to work. They'll just say, hey, look, if you can start talking about profession, that's great. I think no one says I'm going to my profession today. But really, you want to have that seamless transition between life and where you're doing business. Again, I'll stress it again, provide the freedom to fail. The freedom to fail is so important. It gives that responsibility. It gives people the opportunity to grow, and also it gives them the sense that you trust them. It gives them the sense that you are doing everything you can to ensure that they get the experience they need to be better workers and to improve the business and contribute to that bigger picture. So at the end of the day, to manage younger generations, it's about these three things which I've discussed. Be flexible, be transparent, and be inclusive. Make sure that you are understanding what people want. Have those open forums. Be flexible enough to test things out. If they don't work, let your staff know why they don't work. If you are a manager or if you're in a position of power, you need to be able to be open and communicative. I think most of the panels about management today have talked about that. You need to be able to take on feedback, but also provide rationale and be able to provide direction. Say, this is why we're going in this direction. This is why you can't have a slide at work, Dan. This is what you need to be doing, and this is where you need to be doing it. Why? For these reasons. That's the most important thing about managing millennials and Gen Z. Communication, culture, flexibility. If you want to ask a question, I know we've got some question time now. I also just want to share with you, before that, we've got a bit of a takeaway, so I've obviously waffled on for a little bit, but just in case you didn't pick some of that up or you sort of want to take it away, if you've taken a day off today and you need to prove to the boss that you went to a conference, you can jump onto the Raiders.rocks, so it's our agency. Give me a few details. It's a lead marketing exercise, guys. No. Give us a few details, and I've got that takeaway sheet for you there. It's got all the stuff that I've brought up today. I know the slides are going up. We've got a video. Yeah, take it away, and it's got everything there concise. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them.